Is this your husband, Miss Vale? The question cut through the ballroom so sharply that even the string quartet seemed to miss a note. 1 second earlier, the Vale Foundation Gala had been glowing with champagne glasses, white roses, polished marble, and the soft confidence of people who believed money could keep panic outside the doors. Then a little girl started gasping near the children's corner, clutching the front of her pale blue dress while the adults around her froze. Graham Whitaker was not supposed to be noticed that night. He was only the maintenance man in a faded navy work shirt. The single father who had taken an extra shift because rent was due on Monday and his daughter Nora needed new winter boots before the first snow reached Denver. But when he heard that small broken breath, something older than fear moved through him. He dropped his tool bag, crossed the room, and knelt beside Nora before anyone even knew her name. "Look at me, sweetheart." His voice was quiet. "In through your nose, slow like smelling pancakes." Nora trembled, tears shining under the gold lights. "Daddy, I cannot." "Yes, you can. It hurts." "I know." He held one hand behind her back and pointed with the other toward a sealed side vent near the wall. "That vent is stuck. Somebody open it now. She needs air, not attention." A security guard grabbed his arm, thinking he was just another worker stepping out of place. But Graham did not pull away. He did not raise his voice. He only looked at the man with a calm that felt heavier than anger. "My daughter has asthma," he said. "Move, please." That was when Charlotte Vale arrived. White evening dress brushing the floor, diamonds at her ears, her expression composed, but her eyes awake with alarm. She was the woman everyone had come to photograph. The chief executive officer whose foundation had promised $3 million for children's clinics across the Mountain West. But in that moment, she did not look like a headline. She looked like someone watching the world decide whether a child mattered. "Open the vent," she said. No one questioned her. The guard stepped back. A doctor from the donor table hurried over. Saw Graham holding Nora. Saw Charlotte kneeling beside them. Saw the way the little girl's fingers had curled around Charlotte's wrist as if she had always belonged there. Then he asked the question, "Is this your husband, Miss Vale?" Graham lifted his head immediately. "No, sir, I am just." But Charlotte saw Nora's face tighten, saw the shame rising before the breath had even returned, saw a child preparing to be embarrassed in front of a room full of strangers. So she placed her hand gently on Nora's shoulder and said, "He is with me," 3 words, soft, clear, impossible to take back. The room changed around them. The guard lowered his radio. The doctor listened to Graham's instructions. The donors stopped whispering long enough to watch the little girl breathe again. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and second chances, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change and we are glad you are here. Now, back to Graham Whitaker, who had no idea that the most powerful woman in the room had just protected him from humiliation, protected his daughter from shame, and quietly stepped into a misunderstanding that would change all 3 of their lives forever. For a few seconds, no one moved. Not because they understood what Charlotte had done, but because they understood what her name could do. The same guard who had reached for Graham now stepped aside as if the floor beneath him had changed ownership. The doctor crouched lower, no longer speaking over Graham, but listening to him. "How long has she been struggling?" "Less than 2 minutes." "Does she have an inhaler?" "In the front pocket of her backpack, pink zipper." "Any allergies?" "Peanuts, dust, and panic in rooms full of people staring at her." The doctor paused at that last part, and for the first time, he looked at Nora like a child instead of a medical problem. Charlotte noticed. Graham noticed, too, but he did not smile. He was too focused on the rhythm of his daughter's breathing, on the little rise and fall beneath his palm, on the way her eyes searched his face for permission to be safe. The vent clicked open with a metallic sigh. Cool air moved across the marble floor. Nora took one uneven breath, then another. Graham counted softly beside her. 1, 2, 3, good girl again. Charlotte stayed where she was, one knee on the floor in a dress worth more than Graham's truck. her hand still resting gently near Nora's shoulder. She did not pretend to be useful. She did not make the moment about herself. She simply remained, and sometimes remaining is the first form of grace. Around them, the ballroom slowly remembered how to breathe. A woman in pearls lowered her phone. A man from the hospital board cleared his throat and looked away, ashamed that he had nearly recorded a child's fear as if it were entertainment. The quartet recovered in the corner, drawing a soft note from the violin that trembled through the room like light through rain. When Nora finally whispered, "Daddy, I am okay," Graham closed his eyes for half a second. Not long enough to cry, just long enough to think whatever mercy had passed through that room without asking permission. Charlotte heard the whisper and felt something tighten inside her chest. She had stood in rooms with governors, surgeons, billionaires, and judges. But she had rarely seen a man hold steady under humiliation without turning it into pride. Graham did not ask who she was. He did not thank her for saving his dignity. He did not perform gratitude for the wealthy. He only helped Nora sit upright and brushed a loose strand of hair away from her damp cheek. "You scared me, Button," he said. Nora tried to smile. "You said no attention." "I said you needed air more than attention." Everybody looked anyway. Graham glanced around the ballroom, then back at her, then let them learn something. Charlotte lowered her gaze because that sentence found a place in her she had kept locked for years. Across the room, Preston Calder watched with a stiff smile and cold eyes. He had built Charlotte's public image like a glass tower, elegant, distant, untouched. Now, in less than 5 minutes, a maintenance man with worn boots and a frightened daughter had made her look human. And the worst part was not that people believed Graham was with her. The worst part was that Charlotte had allowed it, and something in her face said she was not sorry. Graham helped Nora to her feet only when the doctor nodded that it was safe. He lifted her backpack from beneath a small velvet chair, found the inhaler in the pink zipper pocket, and checked the label twice. The way a man checks a lock at midnight when his whole world is sleeping behind the door. Charlotte stood beside them, close enough to help, far enough not to crowd them. "Thank you," Graham said. But the words came with a careful distance. The kind a working man learns in expensive rooms. "You did not have to do that." Charlotte looked toward the donors, pretending not to stare. "Yes, I did." "No, ma'am." He adjusted Nora's cardigan over her shoulders. "You could have corrected him." For the first time that evening, Charlotte did not answer quickly. The ballroom lights glowed above them, soft and golden. But behind that glow, she could feel the old machinery of judgment turning. Names, titles, net worth, proper circles, people deciding who belonged before they ever heard a person speak. She looked down at Nora, who was now holding one of Charlotte's fingers with small, embarrassed trust. She was scared, Charlotte said quietly. Graham followed her gaze. Nora looked away as if fear itself were something to apologize for. "She gets embarrassed after an attack," he said. "She thinks people will think she is weak." Charlotte's face softened in a way the cameras had never captured. "I know what that feels like." Graham looked up then, not with suspicion, but with surprise. Charlotte Vale, the woman on magazine covers. The woman whose signature could move millions of dollars before lunch, had said it like a confession, not a slogan. A server passed behind them carrying silver trays of sparkling water. The ice rattled gently in the glasses. Somewhere near the stage, a donor laughed too loudly, trying to push the room back into comfort. But Charlotte stayed in the uncomfortable truth. "When I was 10, she said, my father brought me to a charity dinner in Boston. I spilled soup on my dress. Nothing terrible, just soup. But the room went quiet and I remember every adult face turning toward me as if I had proven something they already believed." Nora glanced up. What did they believe? Charlotte smiled. But it was not a happy smile that children should be perfect if they are going to be allowed near important people. Graham's jaw tightened. That is a cruel thing to teach a child. It is. Did anyone help you? Charlotte looked across the ballroom at the banners carrying her family name. At the trustees who smiled when money was near and disappeared when kindness was required. "No," she said. "They corrected me." The silence after that was small, but holy. Graham did not fill it. He had learned that some pain does not need advice. It only needs room. Nora took a shy breath and whispered, "You can hold my drawing if you want." From her backpack, she pulled out a folded paper covered in colored pencil lines, a building with big windows, yellow lights, and 3 stick figures standing under a wide roof. Charlotte accepted it like it was more valuable than any check written that night. And across the room, Preston called her, saw the exchange, saw Charlotte smile at a maintenance man's daughter, and understood something dangerous had happened. She had not just protected them from shame. She had let them into the part of her no board member had ever been allowed to touch. Preston called her across the ballroom with the practiced calm of a man who never hurried unless someone else was watching. His tuxedo was perfect, his smile polished, his eyes cold enough to make warmth feel like a mistake. He stopped beside Charlotte just as Nora folded her hands behind her back, suddenly aware that another adult had entered the small circle of safety. "Charlotte," Preston said, his voice smooth and low. "May I borrow you for a moment?" Graham stepped back immediately, not because he was afraid, but because men like him knew how quickly kindness could be accused of reaching too far. "We should go," he said softly to Nora. Charlotte turned. "You do not have to leave." Preston gave a quiet laugh. The kind meant to sound harmless to everyone except the person it was aimed at. "I am sure Mr. Whitaker has duties. The West Corridor lights still need checking, do they not?" Graham looked at him for 1 second, then nodded. "They do." Nora's hands slipped into her father's. Charlotte saw it. That small act of retreat, and something in her tightened. Preston leaned closer, lowering his voice so the donors would only see elegance, not pressure. "You need to correct this before it grows legs." Charlotte did not look away from Graham and Nora. "Correct what?" "The misunderstanding. A child had a medical scare and you told an entire ballroom that her father was with you." He was. Preston's smile thinned. "Do not play with words. You know what they heard." Around them, whispers began to stitch themselves through the room. A trustee near the silent auction table glanced at Graham's worn work boots. A woman with a diamond bracelet murmured something behind her hand. A younger donor lifted his phone, then thought better of it when Charlotte's eyes moved in his direction. The rumor was no longer a spark. It was smoke finding curtains. Preston kept his voice calm, but his words became sharper. "Your brand is discipline, independence, control. You are not a small-town fairy tale, Charlotte. You are the face of a national foundation. You cannot afford to look emotionally compromised by a maintenance man and his daughter." Graham heard enough. He did not turn around. He simply bent down and tied Nora's loose shoelace slow and careful as if dignity could be practiced in small knots. Nora whispered, "Daddy, did we do something wrong?" Graham's fingers paused only for a breath. "No button." "Then why is he mad?" Graham finished the bow and gently tapped the toe of her shoe. "Some people get nervous when kindness makes more sense than money." Charlotte heard that too. She looked at Preston, then really looked at him, at the man who had spent months shaping her speeches, choosing her gowns, trimming every honest edge from her public life until she looked impressive and felt invisible. "Not yet," she said. Preston blinked. "Excuse me. I am not correcting anything yet." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You are making a mistake." Charlotte's fingers closed lightly around Nora's drawing. The paper was soft from being folded too many times, its yellow windows bright beneath the ballroom lights. "Maybe," she said. "But for once, it feels like my mistake." Preston stepped back, the smile returning to his face for the benefit of the room. But his eyes had changed. He had come to manage a rumor. Now he saw a threat. Not in Graham's clothes, not in Nora's innocence, not even in Charlotte's quiet refusal. The threat was that for the first time in years, Charlotte Vale had chosen grace over image, and Preston Calder knew that if she kept choosing that way, he would lose more than control of the evening. By the time Graham and Nora reached the edge of the ballroom, the room had learned how to smile at them without kindness. That was the strange cruelty of polished places. No one pointed. No one shouted. They simply made space around a person until the space itself became an insult. Graham felt it in the way conversations dipped as he passed. In the way eyes lowered to his work shirt, his tool belt, the old brown shoes he had bought at a discount store outside Aurora 2 winters ago. Nora felt it too. Because children often hear judgment before adults admit they have spoken. "Daddy," she whispered. "Are they looking at your shoes?" Graham glanced down as if he had forgotten he had feet. "Probably." "Why?" "Because they squeak when I walk." Nora almost smiled. "They do not." "They do when I dance." "You do not dance." "Not in public." "I saved my best work for kitchens and grocery store aisles." A laugh slipped out of her, small but real, and it reached Charlotte from across the room like a match struck in a dark hallway. She turned away from Preston just enough to see Graham lift one shoulder in a ridiculous little shimmy that made Nora cover her mouth with both hands. He was not trying to charm the room. He was trying to give his daughter back the part of herself panic had stolen. Near the silent auction table, a silver-haired donor named Evelyn Hartwell stepped into Graham's path with a crystal glass in her hand and curiosity dressed up as manners. "Mr. Whitaker, is it?" Graham stopped. "Yes, ma'am." "And what exactly do you do for Miss Vale?" The words were smooth, but the question underneath them was not. Graham heard the hidden version clearly. "What are you doing here? What did you take? Why did she defend you?" Nora pressed closer to his side. Graham rested his hand lightly on her shoulder. "Tonight, I am checking vents, lights, and exit doors." Evelyn's smile tightened. "How practical." A younger man beside her chuckled. "Well, every Cinderella story needs someone from the service entrance." The little circle laughed softly. Not loudly enough to be rude, just loudly enough to wound. Graham did not answer right away. The chandeliers glittered above him. The marble floor held every reflection except his dignity, and still he stood straight. "Cinderella had a deadline," he said calmly. "I have a daughter who needs to be home by 9:30. Nora looked up at him, unsure whether that was funny, then decided it was and smiled again. Charlotte saw Evelyn's expression falter. She saw the young man look into his drink as if the ice had suddenly become fascinating. She also saw Preston watching, waiting for Graham to become angry, defensive, small. But Graham refused to hand him that gift. A reporter from a local lifestyle magazine drifted closer, badge swinging from her neck. "Mr. Whitaker, how long have you known Miss Vale?" Graham's eyes moved briefly to Charlotte, then back to the reporter. "Long enough to know she helped my daughter when it mattered. And before tonight, I knew her name was on the banners." The reporter blinked. It was not the answer she wanted because it could not be twisted without revealing the cruelty of the question. Charlotte felt something loosen in her chest, something that had been tied too tightly for years. This man was not polished. He was not trained. He did not speak in boardroom language or public relations phrases. Yet, every answer carried more respect than the speeches written by men who charged by the hour. Then Nora tugged Graham's sleeve and whispered, "Can we go fix the lights now?" Graham nodded, "Yes, button." But before they could leave, the ballroom lights flickered once. Then again, Alaham passed through the ceiling. On the stage, the giant screen behind the donation counter went black in the room filled with the sudden silence of rich people realizing that money cannot command electricity to behave. Preston turned sharply toward the technicians. Charlotte turned toward Graham. Graham looked at the dead screen, then at the locked service panel near the west corridor, and his expression changed. Not panic, not surprise, recognition, quiet, steady, and grave. Graham did not move toward the stage at first. He looked at the black screen, then at the emergency lights glowing faintly along the exits, then at the west corridor, where the service panel sat behind a decorative curtain no guest had noticed all night. "Daddy," Nora whispered. "Stay with Miss Vale," he said. Charlotte stepped closer. "What is it?" Graham kept his voice low. "That screen should not have gone dark from a simple overload. The house lights and the donation counter are on separate circuits." Preston appeared beside them before Charlotte could answer. His calm now sharpened into performance. "This is exactly why we need the emergency systems contract approved tonight." He turned toward the nearest board members, raising his voice just enough. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We anticipated the possibility of infrastructure failure." Graham looked at him then, not accusing, not impressed, just still. "You anticipated this?" Preston's smile did not move. "We prepare for everything. Then your technicians should know the backup relay is not in the main booth." Preston blinked once. "Excuse me." Graham pointed toward the west corridor. "It is in that lock panel. Whoever killed the screen did not trip the ballroom. They cut the auxiliary feed between the stage display and the donation server." The technicians near the stage looked at one another. One of them, a young man with a headset and panic in his eyes, said, "That is impossible. That panel was locked all night." Graham did not argue. He walked to the curtain, took the maintenance key from his belt, and opened the metal door. The hinge gave a tired creak. Inside, the wiring should have been neat, labeled, untouched. Instead, one small bypass switch had been pulled halfway down and taped in place with a strip of black electrical tape. Graham stared at it for a long second, and the room seemed to lean toward him. "This was not age," he said.